Okay, I hope everyone is enjoying the event so far. For everyone that's been with us since 8 a.m., this is our first Q&A panel, and we have a lot of great questions that have come in from all around the world from a lot of different individuals. So we'll do our best to jump into all of those questions. To get started, I'd like to introduce our panel. I'm Michael Bernzweig, founder of Software Oasis. We have Cary Lawrence. She is the CEO of Decile. And welcome, Cary.
Thank you.
And we have Gidi Cohen. He is the CEO and co-founder of Bonfy.AI. Welcome, Gidi.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Fantastic presentations from both of you. And I know a lot of the questions the team has had a chance to bring to me. So why don't we just get us started at the top and let's see how many we can get through. The first question came in for Cary, and this question came to us from Marcus, who is here in the US in Des Moines, Iowa. And Marcus is asking, for a small DTC brand on Shopify, what is the smallest first-party data project you'd start with so AI insights are credible and not just wishful thinking?
Yeah, so I think we usually see there's like a little bit of an evolution in that path as direct-to-consumer brands and Shopify brands are starting to expand their capabilities. I think that Shopify has a lot of, sales and transaction data out of the box, which is nice. But I think when you start to get a little bit more sophisticated and want to learn more about, who your customers are, when you start to think about doing greater personalization, you're going to want someone who has more of that data enrichment. So you can add the demographic, psychographic, behavioral type things. Product analytics can be a very important component. We usually see that it's, once you get to about, I would say 10 million in annual revenue, that's when people start to, just flung my light around it, start to look for more enhanced stuff. And then we see there's a next phase where you really start to think about, okay, it's probably time to start investing in my own data warehouse and start to find the right, partners who can sync with that. So that's, it's getting earlier and earlier, I would say. And especially as we start to see, companies across the board, as you heard probably in my presentation, starting to roll out enterprise level agentic AI platforms across their companies. They're starting to want to have, applications and MCP connectors that connect directly into those platforms so that, everything's operating at that level. But there's kind of that, so it's just the general Shopify sales analytics. Then you want to get more of those demographic and product analytics. Then you want to start to think about, your own data warehousing or syncing with someone who has data warehousing capabilities. And, that size can vary a little bit, but I think that things are moving very fast.
Yeah, and I know, in the space, it has become so competitive, not to say any other industry is not super competitive, but just small bits of data and being able to take action on that data can make the difference in a lot of campaigns. The next question came in for Gidi, and Gidi, the question comes to us from, let's see here. I'll pick this one from Jenna, who is joining us from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And Jenna's asking, when AI agents can read across email, docs, and CRM, how do you recommend drawing the first hard boundaries about which cross-system combinations are never allowed?
Jenna, that's a great question. So I would say that I would start with the fact that actually a lot of those systems, even by themselves, before even looking at the cross data set pollination of information and risks, each one of the data sets need to be analyzed by itself, right? There's so much sensitive data in CRM, in emails, in, let's say, the SharePoint of the world, Google Drive, whatever it might be, that you don't need to go far, right, in terms of how kind of risky the situation might be. So I would say a few things. I would first of all recommend, right, to look data set by data set, make sure that the organization, both from AI governance perspective and control, is really ready to let the horses get out of the barn, because that's what typically happens. Once it's out there, it's almost gone forever, right? There's a long-term memory of agents, platforms. There's action items which are invisible, not because of any malicious stuff necessarily that agents are taking, or AI clients, not talking about taking actions which might be malicious. So I would say, first of all, really make sure that data sets that you are connecting the agentic platform to are really legit from security, compliance, customer commitment perspective, to be able actually to connect to them at all. So that's one. Second, I would say make sure that you have the right type of controls, because of course connecting to agentic platform is great, right? There's a lot of benefit to that in terms of automation, reasoning, and a lot of different type of use cases, let's say. So just make sure there's proper controls around what kind of data can be allowed, what cannot be allowed, etc. I would say that at least in our experience, when things are getting, now answering your question, because I know you asked about connecting dots between different data sets, I think once information, let's say unstructured data sources, which typically are going to be file systems or file shares and emails and the like, on one hand, are connected with more structured data sources where a lot of the crown jewels of the organizations are. It can be CRM on customer data, it can be HRIS for internal employee data. That's when things are starting to get really ugly, right? Because then when you marry the structured stuff, which is a lot of, almost of the crown jewels of the organization, at least in terms of the personal related information, customer data, with those unstructured data sources that many people, for a good reason, are not just paying attention for every email or every file. And when you put them together, that's starting to be really ugly from the perspective. So I would really recommend to start from the beginning, which data set is allowed or not, make sure that there's proper control in the get-go, and never kind of skip the outbound controls as well, because data will come together. There will be some residual result in some agentic platform memory that you need to protect against as well.
Yeah, and so many of the different executives and founders that are at the event today have all of these topics on their plate and so many details to get their hands around. And sometimes not making a decision is making a decision in and of itself. So a lot of times, especially with shadow AI, and your team is trying to figure things out, and if you haven't paved the path, they may take things into their own hands. So the next question came for Cary, and Cary, the next question came in from Lauren, who is in, let's see here, just outside of Savannah, Georgia. And Lauren is asking, when different teams define high value customer differently, how do you keep your AI-driven segments aligned so campaigns don't work against each other?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that it kind of gets to the point of having some like shared language and understanding across your various teams. So let's say in this case, your team decided to quantify your highest value customers as the top 10% most valuable, the top decile. So you want that language to be consistent throughout. What is nice about, especially as you start to think about, let's say you're using, your team across the board is using one of those agentic platforms to manage workflows across your teams. And then if you're connecting through other, let's say Decile is your connector to help identify and create those segments of high value customers, there's that shared knowledge and consistency that stays through there. So you can see, at an enterprise level, that all pulls through. But I think certainly it's needing to like make sure that as a team, you're defining those the same way. And oftentimes that's creating as simple as creating an audience. So like a Decile, we would say, okay, here's my top 10% highest value customers. And then that audience is available for anyone to use, both for insights and analytics, as well as for activation on all those platforms. So your retention people, your acquisition people, your C-suite executives, anytime they're asking questions of whether it's our AI analyst within our platform or within your more enterprise agentic platform, they'll have that kind of shared language. So I would say, think about it at the audience level, creating at the audience level, and then it can kind of gets dispersed throughout. But also there are mechanisms, and I think This is certainly the trend that we're seeing is, like, as I said, people, instead of having your teams all using their individual, like, ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, you want everyone to have an enterprise level system that they're using and then syncing those technologies that work seamlessly. Thanks, Lauren.
Makes a lot of sense. And, it's really figuring out the right strategy and communicating with your team, obviously, is key. Gidi, the next question came in for you. And this is from Olivia, who is in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So let's see. Olivia is asking, what is the smallest initial graph of business entities and relationships you suggest modeling so AI systems can start catching misdirected messages and privacy issues?
Hey, it's a good question. I mean, the reality, I assume that you're relating to things that I presented earlier. So, but not specific necessarily to Bonfy, right? The reality is that the graph can be as, let's say, right-sized to your organization, right? Creating those business graph or knowledge graphs are automated processes. Typically, they capture, let's say, if you're looking for internal, let's say, information, just the employee base, typically connect to your Active Directory or equivalent identity management, and that's what you have, right? It's a graph, similarly in the CRM. So the reality, it can work in any size, it can be as small as you want it to be. I would say that all of those graphs can be both created and used completely automatically. I probably not would think about too much about how big or small it is. I just would make it adjustable, right, to the size of organization or the amount of, let's say, entities, identities that your organization is concerned about. Again, typically it's the size of the CRM, let's say number of customers, contacts, if you're looking at external identities, or internal identities, typically the amount of employees or other people that are just connected to your identity management. So it's as straightforward as that. That can provide great context to analyzing unstructured data for AI or human-driven type of flows.
Fantastic. And Cary, this next question, I'm going to spin the globe and bring some of our international attendees into the conversation. From Parma, Italy, we have Matteo, who is asking, when you blend warehouse data with ad platform and enrichment feeds, how do you enforce consistent profitability metrics so optimizations stay grounded in real margins?
So a lot to unpack in that question, Matteo, but I would say just think about it as like your data foundation is the central piece of everything. So when we're dealing with like first party customer data, the first thing you want to be thinking about is, okay, how am I gathering and building up that first party data store, because that is going to be your most valuable asset that you have, particularly as a marketing team, but the company at large, I would say. And then you want to make sure you're finding, someone who is can handle data securely. I'm sure Gidi will agree with that. So like SOC 2 Type 2 certification is essential. And then you need to find the right partner, right? This isn't something that you should, like, if you don't have someone who knows how to manage identity resolution and someone who can ingest that data securely. And then, so that's step one. Then you need someone, if you want the enrichment, you have to have someone who can do all that appending of those additional attributes. And that's all kind of happening in this safe zone. And then that data gets kind of anonymized and moved into an analytics environment. And then it's like, what's nice is, to your point about like segmentation and optimizations. So, you've got the data piece sorted out. You found that person who can, do the identity resolution, do the enrichment of your data. And then the next thing to think about is like the ability to create segments by any dimension. So you want to be able to look at, as like, I think my other question came from, you want to be able to look at, high value customers as a potential segment. You also might want to look at, okay, people who purchased this shirt versus those pants as a different product segment. Then maybe you want to also look at How do a female segment versus a male segment, or maybe you get even more advanced with personas that incorporate those purchase metrics along with those softer metrics. So as long as you're working with a partner like Decile, where you're managing the data securely from the foundation layer, you're enriching it and adding that special sauce. You're pushing that into an analytics environment where you have, the modeled segments. You can have predictive, high value customers. You can have those customers who are predicted to have a high propensity to purchase. And then the other piece that's important that I think, Matteo, you were alluding to too, is you need to activate this information, right? So having those API connections into all those key activation platforms is essential. So you're thinking Meta and Google on the acquisition and retention side, and Klaviyo, Attentive, all your kind of email service providers too. You want to make sure you're working with the system that has those connections with all. So anyway, if you're with the right partner, you should be able to manage all of this. And what's nice, and I would say like the evolution both for my business and I think everyone's, and why this topic is all around AI today, is, and now instead of having to look at dashboards or configure your own reports, it's just so much easier with when you have an AI analyst built in, and that can help do some of that for you. So anyway, all those pieces work together, but you can find partners who can help you do this a little more seamlessly.
Makes sense. And I think it is amazing how all of these topics are so interrelated, because there are, nothing is in a vacuum, especially when AI is touching different parts of your business. Gidi, the next question came in for you, and this is, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, from Amelie, who is in Lille, France. And Amelie is asking, for a mid-market firm with limited security staff, where would you focus first? Discovering AI data flows, labeling sensitive data, as you spoke about, or enforcing real-time policies on AI outputs?
Wow, that's a very tough choice, Emilian. I think it really depends. At the end of the day, right? Security or data protection is not something that is done in a silo, right? It has to have a purpose. Purpose means addressing risks that you identify or you think the organization will have, and that's how I would probably prioritize it. I'll give an example in a second. So that's one. Second, it also relates a lot to your existing security stack in place. Like you mentioned labeling. Labeling can be great if you can enforce by labeling. If you cannot enforce, let's say with some, let's say Microsoft Purview or like, or any other solution that adheres to use labels or adheres to that, that won't help much, right? To label information. It's good to know that you have some sensitive data, but you may not be able to do anything with that. On the other hand, let's say if you already have active adoption, let's say, just take an example, let's say Claude platform, right? With agentic capabilities connecting to your data sources, I would say ASAP kind of use solutions. It can be, doesn't have to be Bonfire or not, but use solutions that actually mitigating or monitoring in real time traffic between let's say this Claude or ChatGPT client or agents to your data sources. Because if you already do that, do it ASAP. As I said, as soon as you have information leaving, let's say, the data source into the agentic world, the danger starts. I'm not saying it's always a done deal in terms of everything, the sky's falling, but it can easily be done because there's a lot of uncertainty and lack of transparency. Not blaming anyone, just the nature of the platforms, of the way to work there. So my point, again, I'd love to talk kind of one-on-one. We can discuss it in more your context, but it really depends on the context of where you have AI adoption and what the risk that you're trying to address. And the answer might be, unfortunately, different in each one of those cases in terms of the priority.
This next question comes in for Cary, and this is from Priya, who's just outside of Denver, Colorado, here in the US. And Priya is asking, how do you decide which early customer segments, like first-time buyers, subscribers, or seasonal shoppers, are mature enough to trust AI-generated recommendations for targeting and offers?
Yeah, well, again, it's how you're kind of able to organize your data and the ability to pull in not just their kind of sales metrics, but you want to be able to understand profitability of those customers as well. So, a system that can look at the margin, ideally by SKU, by product, and so anyway, finding a platform that resolves to individual known customers is like step one. And then once you kind of, have your data all in there, you can create your audience segments. And then you also have, all that transactional data and sales data. So you can see like, okay, well, this person, exactly if I'm developing a cohort of, first purchasers, like you should be able to tell instantly if you're mapping. So if you're mapping these customers as soon as they're acquired, how valuable, what their predictive lifetime value is going to be a year from now. So I would say find yourself a platform that has that ability to do that. You also can understand what their product preferences are and affinities. You should be able to understand, what are their repurchase rates? Are they a one and done, or are they going to be a more, qualified customer long term? Because I think one thing that I always counsel a lot of people about is like when you're thinking about acquiring new customers, it doesn't really matter how much they cost to acquire if they're going to be more valuable for you in the long term. Like it's much better. Let's say Michael costs $150 to acquire as a customer and Gidi is $30 to acquire. But Michael only comes once and buys one thing with your brand. Gidi comes every month and continues to buy. But so the nice thing is like, obviously you want more people like Gidi, but you also need to understand like, okay, based on his persona, based on his purchase behavior, this is how I know that Gideon is part of this cohort that is going to be more valuable to you. So there's definitely platforms out there that can help you to understand, to build those cohorts, to understand their profitability. And then with the AI, it's more about just like making it's a different surface, or it's a different way to get to this information. So that's meant to be more of a democratizing access to those analytics for your general user, right? So you can ask the questions directly within Decile. Our Luma analyst is called Luma. So we would say, hey, for my recent cohort that I acquired in June, what's their average order value, or what's their predicted, future purchase, level. So like you should be able to do all that just in a more easy conversational way. But again, as long as you have the platform that can handle, predictive analytics, cohorting at any dimension, and pulling in all the sales, product, and demographic data, you should be all set.
And I think a lot of it, what I'm hearing is it sounds like trusting the data, but also having the right platform in place. And at the end of the day, it sounds like a lot of it is very measurable and a lot of it is very repeatable, but it's a matter of being able to analyze a lot of it too.
Yeah, you want to be able to map those new customers instantly. I think to Priya's point, like I just got all these people, maybe it was like from some influencer, or maybe it was from some big promotion. Like, are they valuable, or are they like not going to be, your system should be able to tell you instantly based on that persona and what they look like, how valuable they're going to be to your brand.
Interesting. A lot of this tech, I think a lot of individuals listening today that have been at it for a while wish they had years ago. So really amazing. Gidi, the next question came in for you, and I like this question because I think a lot of individuals will benefit from this answer. So this one that I'm picking is from Ryan, who's in Augusta, Georgia. And Ryan is asking, as org charts and customer relationships continue to change, how do you keep your context model current without overwhelming data stewards or breaking existing policies?
Good. So, right, it's a good question. And I would say that, at least, again, our point of view, right, in the way that we implement it, I'm sure that other systems can do the same. It's actually a fully automated type of process, right? So, of course, the entire idea when you have kind of a security solution like ours, but it could be anyone else, it had to add value to the organization, not to add complexity or friction, right? That's to make the organization more secure, not work harder. So basically creating and obtaining and compiling, let's call it that way, this business context, right, for much better data security is done completely automatically, right? So let's say getting contextual data from identity management, CRM, HRIS, other systems, etc., not only can be done, but is done automatically, not just they figure out initially what's the context, so we know what the customers and how to fingerprint them in communication, so we don't mix them together and avoid leakage and all of that. Not only can it be created automatically initially, but updating this type of context is actually relatively, I would say, simple and again fully automated process. So let's say you have new records in your CRM, new employees that joined or left or whatever. All of that can be discovered automatically without much or without any, I would say, a human intervention. So the system can, for you, provide fresh context anytime that you want to analyze without any load by itself, both on the data plane and definitely not creating more friction to any internal users, regardless if they are just the corporate citizens or the security or IT teams.
Cary, this next question comes to us from Ethan, who's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And Ethan is asking, what's a simple way for a mid-market brand to compare AI-suggested customer segments against their own gut feel so they can build confidence before automating more decisions? And I see in the notes here, Ethan indicated that they're on target for just over $30 million as their run rate for this year, if that makes a difference.
Yeah, no, that's we work with a lot of brands squarely in that revenue range. So I think that, the nice thing about data is it's a way to validate those gut assumptions that your teams have across the board. So I think, you need the ability to create segments within your data, right? You want to develop all those segments at multiple different levels, multiple dimensions. So let's say, if you want just to understand a high value segment, or if you want to, as I said before, you can look at it by product type purchaser, or maybe you want it by people from, a certain promotion or a certain, demographic. But once you have the ability to create that audience segment, then you can run all the analytics against that. And so for AI, AI could just be vaporware if it's not on top of the right data foundation, right? So it's you want to make sure that where you're using, and I don't know where your specific kind of AI recommended segments are coming from, but if it's from a platform that you trust that has access to your data with all the transactional information, all the, the feedback loops are there, then that should be fine. And then, you activate it. Even better if your platform connects directly into those activation platforms. And then you get that conversion data back. So it's very easy to say, okay, yes, this is an audience that we've tested. This is, how it performed across the various channels. This is, this is the type of, this campaign brought in a higher value customer than that other one. So it's actually pretty straightforward if you're working with the right platform. But so kind of create those segments, make sure you have the full feedback loop and the ability to kind of connect the analytics to activation. I think that connection from analytics to activation is important.
Fantastic. And Gidi, as we're coming to the end of our session, I want to try to sneak one last question in, which I'm going to send over to you. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, we have a couple of minutes here. So this question is from, let's see here. Let me grab a good one. This is from Carlos, who's just outside of San Diego in California. And Carlos is asking, how do you explain to a non-technical executive that traditional data loss prevention isn't enough once AI agents can freely summarize and recombine information across multiple systems?
It's a great question. I think that maybe the best way to look at it is that kind of you need to fight AI with AI in a sense. That traditional data loss prevention tools that exist for 20 years, maybe more than that, are using, I would say, rudimentary pattern-based techniques to maybe find some simple data structures and say simple kind of like PII that you want to identify, etc. which I would say typically was fine if you looked on more structured data that you just want to make sure it's not getting out there, regardless if it's show itself in unstructured situation like email or file. But when you're looking on AI agent, the way I look at it is almost kind of like a laundry machine, right, of information. You get things in, sometimes they get out in a different way. So the patterns that may have worked occasionally, right, on more traditional type of data is being scrambled completely. And therefore, you need very different type of technologies that take what the human brain does, right, the context we have as humans when we're looking at data, and use similar techniques when you want to make sure the data is not leaking or getting to the wrong hands, etc. The challenge with AI and the opportunity is that humans are getting out of the loop. So something else needs to provide this context that we talked a lot already about that will replace or supplement whatever the humans are getting, are leaving behind in a sense. So basically, I would say fight AI with AI. With solution can actually replace what humans are actually leaving behind, and that's what needed here.
Fantastic. Well, that rounds out our first Q&A session for everyone that's listening in live. Up at the top of the site, you see a big orange button if you'd like to reach out to Cary, Gidi, or any of the other speakers that you hear across the event today. Just click that button and we'll get you in touch. Coming up next, we have another fantastic presentation. Cary, Gidi, I'd like to thank you for both of your presentations today and for answering all of these questions on the Q&A panel. I think we covered quite a bit of ground there.
Thank you, and thanks to all the question askers.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and everyone in the audience. Thank you.